chain of command or with
provide channels for you to voice your opinion to.
Good evening, everybody. It is Sunday. Hope everyone is doing well tonight. Let's kick this off a little bit with a little bit of thinking about what it is that we are struggling for here. And to me, that is that green grass of home. Hope you guys can understand. That's my green grass. Hallelujah.
Standing for life, liberty, in the pursuit of happiness, built upon the shoulders of the Constitution, rule of law and the animating principle that we are all created equal. I need to hear a hallelujah. Though I'm not considered a believer by some, I still believe in the warmth of heaven come. I need the rapture I feel when my feet touch the green grass of home. Then I know I have reached the valley of kingdom come. And when I reach that valley, I need to see you there. Because we don't need a kingdom, we only need freedom. We don't seek a king, we seek the brotherhood of man. And we won't fight for bondage, as we need no king or woman. We will stand undivided, because we will raise the fallen. Now I need to hear a hallelujah as we tear down the wall. The divide between heaven and earth is tears turn to love as we walk through the valley of death. And I draw my last breath. I know rapture I feel when I touch the green grass of home. And I know I have reached the hollow where my ancestors roam.
For people who are enlisted and on those.
All right, y'all. So it is once again, this whole period of listening to what's been happening with our naval diplomacy, our war that's not a war. It's brought back a lot of stuff for me. So my first combat deployment, it was on a fast frigate, guided missile fast frigate. And of course, when I went out to that war, I was only barely 19 years old. I just turned 19 that December and was in war by that January of 91. So again, this is stirring up memories for me that I didn't really realize were quite so raw, because the next time I was on a deployment and ended up turning into a combat deployment. Went off in 1991. I knew I was heading off into combat, but I had just joined the Navy. I was fresh out of boot camp. Let's see, I got into boot camp in July. By, I believe, October, went to my first ship, that FFG McInerney, USS McInerney. And yeah, so got my first combat action ribbon there. But until just a few days ago, listening to a great commentator who's also retired Navy talk about naval deployments, I always kind of just put that story of the first Gulf War on the back burner. Didn't talk about it as much. Didn't want to talk about what that may or may not have done to me and how I felt about that deployment. We won that war in 100 days. But now here we are. The next time I deployed with a Marine battalion, reinforced. We were a Marine Expeditionary Unit, 15th Mute. And when we were in Australia is when the attack happened, 9/11. And so we were the first ones in country when it came to the Marines and Navy sailors. So hospital corpsman with the Marines, I went right in with my Marine Infantry battalion, and I was with a Spec Ops platoon that trailed Force Recon. But again, yes, that was where I earned the next combat action ribbon. But every time I think back to deployments that were say, not with the Marines on ships and then on land, but just sailors packed on a ship, months on end, months and months and months on end. I never really felt like I could claim that as being a real combat experience until this week. Until last few weeks, last few months, we've heard what's been happening on these ships. So let's go over it again. All right, y'all. So and we'll talk more about what that experience is like, what it can do to you. So, all right, 4 days without power, no water, no toilets, no air conditioning, 300 sailors dead in the water in the South China Sea. And the Navy sat on that story for 3 weeks before anybody outside the fleet heard about it. Of course, the fleet knew all about it. 260 days at sea on the USS Abraham Lincoln, longest continuous carrier deployment in modern American history, and a sailor went into the Arabian Sea trying to end his own life. Now, and on the USS Boxer, women are rationing tampons and asking their families to mail them more because nobody's resupplying the USS Boxer. That is an amphibious ship, meaning it carries Marines. So it's Marines and sailors on that ship, ready to deploy in a moment's notice if the president decides that we're going into Iran. They're the ones that are out there floating around just waiting. I guarantee you they've been out there as long as the carrier also. So Congress asked Pete Hegseth for answers in writing 2 weeks ago. He hasn't given them. Welcome to the Hillbilly Think Tank with Spencer Keck. I am the educated hillbilly. And no, that's not an oxymoron. Don't call me a moron. There have been educated, erudite, and emancipated hillbillies in Kentucky ever since my kith and kin came through that Cumberland Gap with Daniel Boone and the other long hunters on their quest to find life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness here. And with grit and determination, that's what they established. And they've left it for every generation after to pick up that mantle after them, to have that grit, to have that determination, and be sure that they're determined and they pass on the determination to their kids that they're not going to give up their liberty and their pursuit of happiness for a life without these three principles. All right. So I'm Spencer Keck, retired Navy doc, combat veteran, current public school teacher, and a candidate for magistrate on the Hardin County Fiscal Court, District 3, here in Hardin County, Kentucky. And I'll tell you up front, this one is close to home for me because I spent 24 years in this Navy. I know what it means when a ship goes dark. And I know what it means when a shipmate goes over the side. I also know what it means when no one's listening to you because they don't have to listen to the military complain. Right? Supreme Court back in the 50s decided that military cannot sue when they are mistreated, grossly mistreated. They cannot sue the U.S. government. Their families can't either, if you didn't know that. All right, segment 1, 3 ships, just one summer. Now, y'all, we think about, again, these ships. I want you to remember, it's close to my heart. Not only did I give a whole career, I was a lifer, as they call us, but got family members that gave careers to the military. And my family, we've got Army, we've got Navy, and we've got Marine Corps, all represented between my father, my brothers, and myself. That's just that generation. I'm going back. You can go back every generation, every single war this country has fought. My family has been in it. And so, you know, it means something to us. We have a real stake in this fight. Like I said, we've been the ones with the grit and determination to fight for that life, liberty, and that pursuit of happiness, no matter what. So let's just lay out what exactly happened, because there's a lot of noise and not enough plain facts, and the plain facts are not damning enough as it is. The USS Benfold is an Arleigh Burke class destroyer. Again, that was my last combatant ship that I was an independent duty corpsman on, was that class of ship. I wasn't on the USS Benfold. I was on another destroyer, same class. So I know exactly what it's like for those 300 plus crew members on that type of ship. You know, they had only 3 corpsmen. Senior one, myself, I was the senior medical representative. On any other ship, it would have been senior medical officer. And then under me were 2 junior corpsmen. We had to do everything when it came to, if you imagine all the medical care, including inspection of the kitchen and the food resources, inspecting the food as it came on the ship, inspecting the water in every single area of the ship to make sure it was being purified properly and not going to make anybody sick, inspecting the furthest depths of the ship down the hot engineering spaces to make sure that the engineers weren't getting too hot and having to work too long in places that would kill them if they stayed there too long in the heat. That's in addition to making sure everyone had their immunizations, and then we gave them, to me treating people for anything from, I don't know what, I found in the Navy as an independent duty corpsman, I diagnosed diabetes. I diagnosed, of course, sexually transmitted diseases. I found, people were pregnant on board and we had to get them off the ship. Treated all kinds of injuries. You can name it. I also had to be involved in every single training scenario on the ship. Insert first aid training into every drill that we did and train the whole crew on first aid. Well, go on and on and on, but destroyers are no joke. They are long hours at work for every single person on it. When you're deployed at sea, you're 7 days a week working. No days off. There's no weekends. There's no 5-day work week. No. There's no 8-hour work day. That's not the way it works in the Navy. You deploy, you're lucky if you get 4 hours of sleep. And engineers often operate on running 32 to 36 hours without getting any sleep down the engine rooms. That's what we're talking about. Everybody thinks that this is just, something easy. No. Imagine, head down to your basement, spend 9 months down there. Don't walk outside past your door. And most of the time, you won't even have time to do that. turn off the lights, and turn off your air conditioning at times too. But also think about, oh, you're down there working your basement. That's the only place you can move to. You can move over briefly to the kitchen, but you're going to be crowded. When you eat, you're going to have someone else at your elbows. When you go to the head, that's the name for the restroom, to the Navy Marine Corps, you're going to have 30 people in there showering with you, butt naked. And you're hoping that the water's hot. You're hoping that's not out. You only get 2 minutes to shower if you get that time at all. So that is your life. And in your basement, you've got 2 jet engines or more, depending on which kind of ship you're on. You're having to maintain them at all times. And that's going to heat up your bedroom. That's going to make noise at all times. You're going to do that once straight. So that's what it's like to live on a ship. That's what it's like to be on a destroyer. So let's go back. USS Benfold, Arleigh Burke, class destroyer, South China Sea. July 24th, a generator casualty on that ship knocks out all of its power, y'all. 4 full days. No propulsion, no drinking water, no working toilets, no galley. That means galleys were what we call the kitchen in the Navy and Marine Corps. No air conditioning on the ship all that time. And the heat of the South China Sea. So once that hot water on the ocean heats up the hull of the ship, it's not cooling it off because the water's making it hot and the outside's hot. And your engine, was running. It didn't lose all that heat didn't just go away on its own from the engine room. So while Chinese forces are watching a dead in the water American warship, a sister ship had to send over meals. Tugboats had to tow her to Subic Bay in the Philippines. The Navy didn't disclose it publicly. US NI News broke the story on August 14th, 3 weeks after the fact. USS Abraham Lincoln, the carrier, 5,000 sailors and Marines aboard, deployed since November, redirected into the Iran war. Now past 260 days at sea, with over 200 of those consecutive. No port call. That is the longest continuous carrier deployment in the modern history of the United States Navy. On August 3rd, a sailor went overboard in apparent suicide attempt. He was recovered within the hour by a search and rescue helicopter. And separately, a sailor told his wife he'd physically grabbed a shipmate off the rail before that sailor went over. Families have described overflowing toilets, food and water problems, and sailors telling loved ones they hope they don't wake up tomorrow. Now, that's what we're looking at. And again, why did this happen? That's what we really have to think about. There is a dereliction of duty that no one's talking about. I can't say no one. There's people that are, me included being one of them, but you're not getting this on most of the regular news networks. Now, and there's a reason that those supply problems happened. Reporting that is out this week says the Navy's main resupply base for the Persian Gulf, Naval Support Activity Bahrain, was hit by Iranian strikes between February and June. Bad enough that the Navy had to shift supply operations to a United Kingdom base on Diego Garcia, 2,200 miles away. That's according to MS Now's national security reporting. The Pentagon's response was to call it crazy lies. And I'll say it plainly, y'all. I can't independently verify that claim from here, and the Pentagon disputes it. But, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, must be a duck. So it means the Lincoln's food and water problems weren't mismanagement in a vacuum. They were the predictable result of a resupply base getting knocked out, and nobody told the American people that's what happened. Now, how do we know that's what happened? Because, the Pentagon tried to block all the satellite images, but there are other satellites besides one the Pentagon has, and they can't be blocked. And they have identified that those bases were destroyed. those supply lines in Bahrain, and every single other base we have in the Middle East was wiped out by Iran. You know what? What we also know, once Iran figured out they've been successful, they tried to launch, and they did launch 2 missiles at Diego Garcia. So they knew what was up. Luckily, we were able to intercept those 2 missiles, but it was close. So they knew that they had been successful in hitting our supply lines. They knew what that was doing to our ships and with our sailors and Marines on them. And do we have any truth coming from our leadership in DC and the Pentagon and the White House? That's what we're here to talk about tonight. So the USS Boxer, amphibious assault ship, Middle East, at sea since March, with almost no port calls either. Now, got to let you know, if you don't know this, ships like the Boxer, ships like the Lincoln, those very large ships, they don't go anywhere without a whole flotilla of smaller vessels with them. They're going to always have some submarines near an aircraft carrier. There's going to be destroyers near that aircraft carrier to protect them, and there's going to be cruisers near that aircraft carrier to protect them. They also, at times, and I'm sure right now, will have marine amphibious ships with them. Those amphibious ships are the ones that carry the Marines. And that's what the Boxer does. But the Boxer is doing another mission over in the South China Sea. So, of course, the Boxer has smaller ships around it to protect it also. I say smaller, crews of 300 something, like on the destroyers that would be near the Boxer also, or the cruisers. They're going to have more than that 300 something crew that the destroyers have. But all of these ships, if their mama ship and daddy ship don't get to go in port, it's tough for those small ones too also, because they have to stay out there and protect that carrier that doesn't get to go in port. So everybody's acting like it's just the Lincoln. No, dubious. All right. So again, back to the Boxer. Since March, with almost no port calls. Families say the women on board have run out of the feminine hygiene products and are rationing what they have left because care packages are not reaching the ship. Now, y'all, this is just outrageous. So the Navy's official response was one word on social media: false. Full stop. That's it. That's the level of engagement that families got, y'all. And families know better. Now, you also have to realize that whenever ships enter these types of arenas, the Navy can tell that whole flotilla, hey, cut your internet. Don't let anybody talk to their families. And that's what they'll do when they don't want the families letting any of us out here know what's really going on. So let's bring it to Hardin County. How does our story relate? Well, Hardin County has sent sons and daughters into that fleet for generations upon generations. Some families right here in District 3 have someone deployed on a ship just like these 3 right now. Guarantee you. This isn't a headline to them. It's a phone call that they're afraid to miss every single day. It's an email that they're constantly checking. Because, on those ships, you don't just get to make a phone call anytime you want either. You don't have cell phone reception out there where they're at. And the ship's phones, again, will be cut off when they're at what we call River City, meaning no outside communication going in or going out from the ship's crew. So, thinking about that, this county and this state send a lot of folks to the military per capita, but this county especially. We have a long history of folks being proud to serve right from here. So now, let's go to segment 2, because Congress asked, Whiskey Pete Hegseth ducked. Now here's the part that made me want to record this episode, because I've seen the criticism out there that Congress is sitting on its hands. Well, that's not what happened, and they deserve credit for what they actually did this time around. Could they have done more? Absolutely. But here is what they did. On August 15th, all 13 Democrats on the Senate Armed Services Committee, plus the top Democrats on the Appropriations Committee and its Defense Subcommittee, sent Whiskey Pete Hegseth a formal letter. They demanded a timeline for the USS Lincoln crew's return. They demanded to know what mental health, medical, and chaplain resources are actually aboard that ship. They asked point blank whether there have been suicides or suicide attempts during this deployment. And like I said, there are some outlets that have reported there have actually been successful suicides on this deployment. We need an answer. Well, they formally requested a bipartisan congressional delegation be allowed to go aboard and see it for themselves. Now, why they have to ask their Congress, I'd like to know. House Democrats sent a separate letter the same week to the acting Navy Secretary. Now, y'all, we've got to sit with this for a bit, because I have been dissatisfied with congressional oversight. Now they're doing this. They're saying, let us out to that ship. Let us out to these ships. Let us see what's going on. They sent a formal letter with that request to the SecDef. And what do we get? Radio silence. So the ask has already been made in writing by name, and Hegseth's public answer while he was traveling in Panama, a little trip he took down there to talk crap and to pretend like he was doing jungle warfare training. Well, his official answer was that the reporters were completely, the reports, that is, were completely misrepresented. That they're reporting stuff that's not true. Well, sorry, that's not untrue. It's true. Very true. So President, I don't know what to call this guy anymore. I don't have the respect to call him President Trump. This is, just bone spurs to me. Oh, Captain Bone Spurs' answer was that the ship hadn't been deployed nearly long enough. That's not an answer to a congressional oversight letter. That is a dodge. That is a dodge, and that is a dereliction of duty. And I'll give credit where credit is due. This isn't only a Democrat concern. Republican Congressman Don Bacon went on national television and said plainly that Congress should have oversight here. When a combat vet like Bacon breaks from his own party's Pentagon chief to say that, you ought to listen. We all should. Now, segment 3, the pattern underneath it all. This is what we got to look at. So let's think clearly, because this is that fibrous material that connects all this tissue together. And I want to be careful and honest tonight with you all, because I'm not going to tell you that, Whiskey Pete is a great guy, although I know some people like me to. But I do know that we're talking about a Secretary of Defense that blocked officer promotions because we know that he is anti-diversity, anti-equity, and anti-inclusion. And I know that if anybody on the Lincoln or the Boxer in high rank is going to push back, he would make sure the same thing happened to them that happened to the commanding officer of the USS Theodore Roosevelt when he pushed back during his deployment during 45 administration. The first time Captain Bone Spurs was POTUS, and that commander was relieved for asking for help for his crew. So there's no reporting that draws a conclusion that, Whiskey Pete has denied promotions for anybody on these ships. But do we think that it'd be beyond this guy? We've already seen SAC people that are black men, females in the highest ranks. No, we've seen it already, time and time again. And we've seen him sack the most qualified general in the military, the last man out of Afghanistan. I report on this because that general was telling him that his plans in the Middle East were full of it. But here's what is reported for sure. Back in June, Whiskey Pete Hegseth blocked 9 Navy officer promotions, 3 women, 2 black men among them. He blocked 9 Air Force colonel promotions where, of the 17 names that made it through, only 1 was a woman and none were black. Earlier this year, he pulled 4 Army officers off a promotion list, 2 women, 2 black men. Frank Kendall, who ran the Air Force under the last administration, said in his 3.5 years, he never saw a defense secretary personally edit a promotion list, and he never tried to do it himself. He called what's happening right now unprecedented, and it is unprecedented. And my whole career, my whole life in the military, in the Navy Marine Corps team, I never saw this happen. Never, and I saw some Secretary of Defenses that I didn't care for much, but I never saw them go this far, go this deep in the ink. I never saw this happen up until now, even since I've been retired, and I retired in 2014. So since taking over the Pentagon, Hegseth has sidelined or fired more than 20 flag officers, including the first black chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the first woman to serve as Chief of Naval Operations. We're talking generals and admirals. So here's the pattern that I want you to notice. Not a conspiracy, a pattern. A defense secretary who has spent real political capital scrutinizing the record of officers over diversity, equity associations, while the enlisted sailors actually living in un-air-conditioned berths and rationing tampons get a one-word denial on social media. Different ranks, same Pentagon, same picture. Dismiss first, explain never. Segment 4, what oversight actually looks like. And this is where my Navy time talks, not my politics. When I was in Gulf War, Afghanistan with the 15th MU, 24 years total, multiple other deployments. Readiness was not a talking point. It was a daily accounting point. You knew your supply chain. You knew your medical readiness. You knew if your people were breaking down, because if you didn't, people died or people quit the service altogether. And both of those cost the country more than fixing the problem in the first place. That's what we have to really, really look at. Congress asking for a bipartisan visit to the Lincoln, it's not political theater. It's the most basic form of civilian oversight that the Constitution gives them over the military. And Whiskey Pete Hegseth stonewalling it, well, it isn't strength, it's evasion. Now, y'all, again, let's bring it back home one more time. If you're a Hardin County family with someone deployed right now, you deserve a Pentagon that answers congressional oversight letters instead of dismissing them from a press gaggle down to Panama where you're pretending to be a warrior. That's not a partisan ask. That is the bare minimum from anyone that holds such a high position of what should be honor in our nation, what should be more than that, duty and responsibility. Right now, we've got dereliction of both duty and responsibility to our sailors, Marines, airmen, and soldiers. So, my final take: 3 ships, 1 summer, a power failure nobody disclosed for 3 weeks, a carrier crew that's been at sea longer than any in modern history, with a sailor who nearly didn't make it back over the rail. And I still want to know if there were others that actually killed themselves. Women rationing hygiene products and getting a 1-word denial for their trouble. Nope, nope, nope. No, y'all, we cannot let this abide. This must not abide. This is not what it means when we say those folks are out there defending our life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness rights. This is not what we mean when we say that this nation is built on the law of the Constitution, on ethical laws. And it's definitely not what we say when we say that this country is built on that animating principle that we are all created equal. We're not acting like we really believe that these sailors and Marines are built equal or should be treated equal to us. The sailors are going through heck. And here we are, sitting in what really is Shangri-La, no matter how much troubles we're having on a daily basis here in this country. So on Friday, right on cue, the Navy announced the Lincoln is finally coming home. Not because Whiskey Pete Kegsbreath answered Congress, not because he admitted one darn thing. The acting Navy Secretary made the announcement and, in the same breath, accused the media. Remember, this is the 5th pillar of democracy. They accused the media of trying to paint our warriors as victims. Well, you know, if you victimize warriors, you've made them that. American voters, they don't want them to be victims. They want you to quit victimizing them. So even the fix, y'all, it comes wrapped in another denial. Now, are we going to abide that? Congress did its job, asked the hard questions in writing. The Secretary of Defense's job now is to answer them, not dismiss them, not deflect them to a reporter in Panama, but to answer them. Till he does, every excuse he offers is just another watch that nobody is standing. And that, y'all, can't abide. So, y'all, appreciate it. We got a few comments out here before I close off tonight. Let me make sure I go through them real quick. Hopefully, Angry Voter is still on here. Are we tired of this MAGA nightmare yet? Oh, yes, I am. And you asked what's clipped onto the front of my cap. Looks rad. Yep, this is from OAF Nation. Great veteran-owned business. They make these patches you can take on and off with Velcro there. Got it on my Notch hat here. Notch brand hat. Yeah, so pretty cool. Angry Voter apparently likes it. All right. So, like I said, I am so tired of this nightmare. Angry Voter again looks like he agreed. Angry Voter says, warm up the M1A1 Abrams already. Tom said, ditto. Angry Voter USA 28, Old Salt. Awesome. Tom says, I learned early in life that it was not a good fit for military service. I have nothing but respect for those who have done, even read the words of Smedley Butler, one of my heroes, that is, Tom. And that the Idjit regime has allowed the Navy to have such poor support just blows my mind. I recognize that the Lincoln couldn't resupply because Idjit's attack on Iran led to Iran damaging the warehouse where a carrier would resupply. Exactly. So that is DJTs. As you said, I DJTs. just, this is a complete dereliction of duty. Can't say anything, he can't pass the buck. He can try, but can't do it. So Tom says, I just use Idjit. It's his initials plus the lowercase I, and it's pronounced Idjit, which itself is a version of idiot. And again, y'all, before I close off, again, just imagine that you're sitting in your basement, 2 jet engines, either right below you, right next to you. You're going to sleep on top of them. The hum of them or the roar of them is always going to be ringing in your ears. That's what it's like being on one of these ships. Imagine that, again, you have to share your bathroom with 20, 30 other men in the men's berthing or women in the female berthing. Imagine that. Imagine then that the water goes out. You only got 2 minutes to take a shower anyway when you're out at sea. But now imagine you don't even get that on the day that you happen to have enough time to take a shower, because oftentimes you don't. If you're lucky to get 4 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period, which many of the engineers are not, again, they'll go 32 hours, 36 hours. I've even seen them push themselves to 72 hours with no sleep in these dangerous conditions down deep in the bottom areas of the ship. And when they're down there, those engine rooms are hot, dangerous, loud. And here they are, that much sleep deprivation, having to do the most dangerous jobs in the world. They're running power plants, diesel engines. Diesel generators, jet fueled power plants for those 2 jet engines. That's propulsion on destroyer. Now imagine same conditions, but you're on an aircraft carrier. So instead, you've got nuclear reactors to run and man in those hot spaces, the bottom of the ship. While up above, you've got jet catapults, which, of course, if you haven't been paying attention, our president decided that he wants to go away from the electromagnetic catapults. And for some reason, he's never been in the Navy, refused to serve in the military, decided he wants to bring back steam catapults. Steam catapults, now that high pressure, extremely hot steam. The steam is so vaporized that you can't even see it. When it does blast out, if there's an accidental rupture in one of those lines, but it will burn someone straight down to the bone, as I've explained before. I've seen it happen. But the president wants to bring that back. So you got the sound of when I was in the medical berthing on a carrier, that was right over where we were sleeping. So when these jets are taking off and landing all night long and being thrown off the ship with those catapults, because the ships are too short for the regular jets to take off without being thrown off like a slingshot with those catapults. You got all that noise down the engineering space. You got all the heat and noise and lack of sleep. And you're going to do that for 9 months straight with hardly any time on board. Yeah. Don't expect those guys to come back the same. All right. Tom says during that 6-week deployment, back up. Tom says, my father was in Navy ROTC for 2 semesters and spent summer camp on the carrier Randolph. As a midshipman, his berth was right under the forward catapult. There you go. Yep, I can attest to that. You're correct. It was for a midshipman. They've been probably in the medical berthing, one right next to it. During that 6-week deployment, his right kidney failed and was removed by the onboard doctor. And I'm telling you, Tom, that would have been a surgeon. Yep. And he got medical discharge. Yeah. When I've gone out to sea on a carrier before, we actually out at sea, we do vasectomies. Because there would be waiting lists back in Naval Hospital, Portsmouth, Virginia. But if you did it out there at sea, there's no waiting list. And the ships of the carrier size actually have ORs on them, whole medical bays. It's quite amazing, but it's also something that, again, these people being mistreated the way they are under those conditions, it's intolerable. So, all right, y'all. This has been the Hillbilly Think Tank. I am Spencer Keck, candidate for magistrate. Please like and subscribe. Please push this message out to anyone you know, especially if they're in District 3 of Hardin County. Anywhere in Hardin County, let's get the word out. I've got to get votes in November. I've also got to get people concerned because these things, they trickle down. Our sons and our daughters are affected by this. Our taxpayer money is being mismanaged, squandered when our servicemen and women are treated like this. This is something that we cannot let happen. We can't tolerate it, can't abide it. Abiding it is dereliction of duty on our part. It becomes November and we still put people like this back in office, then it's dereliction of duty of us, the American voting citizen. That's what we've got to realize. Up and down our ballot, we've got to look careful. Don't just let them give lip service. What do they actually do right now? When you're considering re-electing anybody in this Congress, if they weren't on that letter to Hegseth, they weren't pushing back right now, you need to boot them the crap out of there. Because this is an absolute dereliction of duty. And voters that put up with this anymore, they're facilitators. And we got to quit being facilitators of abuse of our U.S. military. They go through too much for too long with, saying thanks to them when they come home. Yeah. Don't say thanks if you continue to vote for people that don't push back. Don't bother thanking us if you know that your vote voted for this or didn't vote against it after that you've seen what's happened, after you've listened to my reporting. If you're going to scoff and say, oh, I'm going to keep on voting for the same people because they got a certain letter by their name that you like, yeah, don't forget these tariffs. We'll talk more tomorrow. When we come up tomorrow, it's going to be about the trade war that we just started again, went deeper on with Canada. If you hadn't heard, we put 50% tariffs on now because President Carney of Canada, he's had it. He's had it with the bullying. And, our farmers, we got to listen. We got to watch. We've got eyes. We can see what it's done last year to our crops. We can see what it's done to our loss of our great industry, the bourbon industry here. There's so many bourbon distilleries now going bankrupt. That is Kentucky jobs drying up and going away. And when I say support local everything, I mean it. And supporting local everything isn't supporting this trade war with our friendliest neighbor in the world, demanding that they become our 51st state, either by choice or by force, is what the president has said on numerous occasions. So now here we go, taking this trade war even further and going deeper in the paint on it. Anything that is not pushing back on this in November is a dereliction of duty. And I won't forget it. Hopefully you won't forget it. Y'all, again, we got to keep thinking deeply. Don't forget all those folks deployed overseas, because many of them are our sons and daughters from right here in Hardin County, right here in Kentucky. Many folks like me want anybody to speak for us when we were pushed to the limit. We need people to push back. Yeah, we know we're choosing a career when we go in the military that is the toughest that there is. But when you make it tougher than it should be because you have no plan, and then you want to lie about your plans and give us smoke screens and lie about what's going on, that's a bridge too far. You're up front with us, sailors, Marines. We'll take all the crap that can be thrown at us when you're honest with us. Tell us what your plan is. If you made a mistake with the plan, own up to it. But we haven't had this with this regime. So y'all, don't forget those folks deployed overseas right now. It's serious. And just because the Lincoln's coming back doesn't mean that the Boxer isn't still going without port calls. Doesn't mean that all these other ships out there in support of those ships that also don't get to go to port. There's many more than just those 5,000 on the USS Lincoln and the few thousand that are on the Boxer. So, all right. Bless your corazon. I hope you have a great rest of the week. And again, we got to love our neighbor as ourselves, because our flag in Kentucky says that united we stand, divided we fall. We love our neighbors as ourselves, and we say, yes, I am my brother's keeper. Yes, I am also my sister's keeper. Then y'all, we cannot fall. So that's what we're here for. Don't forget to vote in November. Don't forget to talk to your friends. Give them a little shake in the collar if they think that they're going to blow this election off. Remind them that life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, they're not just handed to you. You've got to wrestle for it every generation. Produce it with your sweat, blood, and tears. And you've got to demand that your government is accountable. Good evening, Lorena. Good evening, Tom. Good evening, America. Was it Angry Vote, I believe? Everybody that's been on here tonight, make your comments. And if you want to make your comments, just watching. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Kingdom come.